Well, good afternoon. Bonjour et tous. Thank you for joining us at today's Tourism Town Hall. I'm Walt Judas. I'm the CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of BC. I will be your moderator for today's session. TIAC's Town Hall series is an event partnership between the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, Destination Canada, and TIA BC. We'd also like to thank Air Canada as the sponsor for this series. The Tourism Town Hall will provide the opportunity to hear from TIAC, Destination Canada, and TIA BC to better understand efforts being made nationally and provincially on behalf of our industry. More importantly, the session will provide an opportunity to engage on issues affecting your businesses and the tourism industry in this province during the time of COVID-19. It will also give you a chance to provide feedback on government policy for the recovery and rebuilding of our sector. Before we start, just a reminder that we will have time at the end of this session for some Q&As. If you have any questions that you have not already sent us in advance, please submit them through the Q&A interface, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. We'll pick them up during the course of the presentations. Also, please note that today's session will be recorded and made available on the TIAC and TIA BC websites. And lastly, for those that may be more fluent in French, we've sent the presentations by email in French for you to easily follow along, and they'll also be made available on our respective websites. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land within which each of us call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. I'm speaking with you today on the unceded lands of the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations, and I thank them for their hospitality. Our panelists for today are Vivek Sharma, the board chair of the Tourism Industry Association of BC and CEO of the Fairmont Hot Springs Resort. Beth Potter is the president and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, and Marsha Walden is the president and CEO of Destination Canada. So let's get right to our presentations. It's my pleasure to welcome Vivek, who doubles as the board chair of the Tourism Industry Association of BC and is also the CEO of the Fairmont Hot Springs Resort. Vivek, over to you.
Thanks, Walt. I just want to acknowledge that I am coming today from the shared and unceded traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and Shuswap people and the home of the Métis Nation of British Columbia. I want to first and foremost take this opportunity to welcome Beth Potter to TIAC and Marsha Walden to DBC, Destination Canada. My apologies, Marsha, to Destination Canada, and for taking the time to share the insights with our British Columbia tourism industry people. So next slide, please. TIA BC, as we all know, is the premier advocacy organization for the Tourism Industry Association in British Columbia. And prior to this small world-changing event that happened last year, you can see we had a list of various priorities and advocacy roles that we were working on. As COVID hit, our immediate focus shifted on making sure that there is relief and recovery advocacy to ensure that our partners in industry in BC have the right support needed to get through to COVID and to get to the other side. Next. During the COVID period, our priorities kept shifting as the need be, and The biggest ones were to work with the provincial government and advise on behalf of the industry, the various orders, travel restrictions, etc., which were coming up. A big thing that we worked on was around solvency and liquidity challenges that our industry were facing. We partnered with a variety of other industry organizations. We are consistently and constantly working on consumer confidence and educating our larger communities for how are we going to be able to welcome consumers back into our respective communities. And as we all know, there were some challenges around refunds and deposits that were taken. So we've been working through that with our various partners through that. Next slide, please. Travel restrictions. We've gone through various phases of travel restrictions, including some comments early in the winter around travel bans, and TIAC has been supportive of making sure that we support our provincial health officers and the government, while at the same time be cognizant of making sure that we do the right thing and ensure that none of the restrictions and bans have a long-term negative implication on our travel and tourism economy. You see just a couple of examples of some of the stuff that we've been advocating on and talking about in the media around travel restrictions. Next slide, please. Day before yesterday, our provincial health officer and our premier came and announced what the restart and relaunch of opening our larger economy and the industry would look like. TIAC has been working tirelessly over the past few months in working with the government in recommending and laying out things that the industry would want to see, things that will support our business community and operators to have a clear understanding of what the future looks like, so that they can plan not just from a cash perspective, but operationally, marketing, labor requirements, so that when the right time comes, our industry and operators are ready to welcome back our visitors. Next. There were a variety of recommendations that we have been making to the government in terms of relaunching tourism and reopening of our larger tourism economy. Some of the key things have been already captured in the announcements that came day before yesterday through our province. There are still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially when it comes to international travel, reopening of our borders, making it easier for people who are fully vaccinated. There is still some details that will need to be put together for larger events, themes, but TIAC, along with its other partner organization, continues to work with the government to make sure that those details, when the right time comes, are in place to help our industry and our businesses. Next. As we keep going through the reopening phases, one of the most important things is communications, not just for our industry partners, but also for our communities and also for our consumers. The focus that we have on communications is making sure that the consumer and our communities understand that it is safe to travel, educate them about the various things that our industry has done about making sure that the people, the staff, the communities stay safe while we still continue to do our business, a positive messaging about travel and that it is safe, that the right time has come. A key thing that we have been advocating about is that the challenges we have seen in the spread of COVID is not because of travel, but because of behavior. And we want to take a positive approach towards it and make sure that we are encouraging good behavior instead of a public shaming around travel or those isolated incidents when people's behavior is causing the spread of the pandemic. and continue to support for government and corporate travel. The foundation of our industry is around the ability for people to move for leisure, but also importantly for business. And we understand that this technology that has helped us survive through the pandemic and that we're using today can also be a hindrance in the growth of our industry. So we will continue to advocate and support to make sure that all those business meetings, conferences, etc., come back to us in time. Liquidity, the biggest challenge on our industry's part is the lack of funds. There are expenses which keep on occurring all the time. We are consistently focused on making sure that we advocate on behalf of the membership so that our businesses have enough liquidity to work. Our large operators have had challenges in accessing some of the provincial and federal grants. We continue to work with them and focus on making sure that they get the help that they need. Working capital, some loans which are secured through the government. Our industry, as we all know, is a highly leveraged industry. So there were a lot of businesses which were not being able to access some of the loans because their debt servicing was not allowing them to get those. So to working with the government to make sure that some of those loans are guaranteed by the government and educate the government as to how a large percentage of our businesses have not been able to secure those debts and why it is essential for the government to guarantee those debts. Next slide, please. Continuing on liquidity, it is to make sure that our government understands that putting a grant out is the first step, or putting a loan out is the first step, but then make it easy for people to be able to access it. If people are not being able to access it, then it's not helping us in any way. The circuit breaker package was a great example where people have been able to access it, and we have to make sure that the government understands that that's the line of financing and grants that our industry needs. Continuing on our liquidity recommendations, a big piece of what we have been talking about is some of the fixed expenses which our operators have been left with, whether it comes to utility, insurance, ground fees for our tenured lands, lease payments. Those are all things which are still very high on TIABC's agenda of advocacy, and we're consistently in touch with the government talking about them. The reopening of the borders, we are glad to see the reopening plan, which talks about a plan of people being able to travel within Canada at certain time. However, we also know the value of international tourism and how domestic tourism is not something which will sustain our industry forever. We are working to make sure that there are examples from other countries like Japan and China and Denmark, which have adopted vaccination cards, which is something that we want to continue to work. The essence of international traveler cannot be understated. It brings a huge value to our economy in British Columbia, and we want to make sure that when the time is right, we continue to open those borders. Next. A lot of our businesses within the province of BC, and not just those which are in the coastal region of Vancouver and Victoria, but all across, depend on the cruise ship season. The cruise ship is an extremely important piece of our tourism economy, and we want to make sure that the recent legislation that has been passed in the US is a temporary one, but also work with the federal government in making sure that the ban on the cruise ship industry is not left right up to February of next year, but it can be opened up when the borders get opened up. So hopefully in fall or whenever we start opening international borders, we would want to see our cruise ship passengers coming back to British Columbia. Next. The wage subsidy program, which our government has, federal government has initiated, is an extremely important tool, which has helped a lot of our businesses to survive. Along with that, the CRHP program, which has been implemented, our word, our advocacy to the governments is to ensure that the Canada Wage Subsidy Program is available to the hospitality and tourism sector right through to the middle of 2022, so that the industry has had enough time to recover and be able to stand on its own. We know that it has been the hardest hit industry, and we wouldn't want this to be taken away along with the rest of the industries in the fall. The CRHP program is again something that we want to advocate and make sure that our partners are able to access both of those programs so that they can maximize the benefit and not get penalized for using one or the other. Next. And I want to end by at our recommendations to our federal government around the funding of the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. This is an organization which plays a huge role in making sure that our cultural heritage is an important product for our consumers, both locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, available for our consumers. The lack of funding that is in the new budget that has been done for Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada is something that we take very seriously, and we are advocating to the federal government to reassess the right level of funding for AITC. Next. And I would just want to end with our recommendations and the work we are doing towards labor market. As we know, all of our operators are extremely challenged with the situation that they are faced in. We know that we've lost a lot of our industry who has migrated during the last year and a half to other industries and have no plans of coming back. So we are working with various organizations, including GoToHR and Tourism HR Canada, to find ways of getting back our labor force so that we have the right people to service the levels of business that we expect coming up. With that, I will hand it over to Walt and continue our presentation.
So as we tee up for Beth's presentation, thank you, Vivek. I've had the pleasure of working with Beth Potter for a number of years. Of course, in her previous position as the CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario and part of a larger group that worked directly with TIAC, but now we're very fortunate to have Beth step into the senior role at the Tourism Industry Association of Canada. So Beth, again, welcome to you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Walt, lovely comments. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just delighted to be here with you today, virtually in beautiful British Columbia. Bonjour tout le monde et merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui. Thank you for participating in today's Tourism Town Hall and for allowing me to share an update on the work that the Tourism Industry Association of Canada has been doing on your behalf. Before I start, I would like to first take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home from coast to coast to coast. We extend our respect to them for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. So as Walt just said, I recently joined TIAC as president and CEO, but I am no stranger to the industry and have been actively involved for more than 30 years. I understand how hard these past 15 months have been on you and how concerned you are about the future. Many of you are asking, how are we going to get through this? And what is TIAC doing to help? And that's why I'm here, to give you an update on our current activities, initiatives, and our plans to lead Canada's tourism economy through to recovery. So TIAC is the national voice for the tourism industry. We take action on behalf of Canadian tourism businesses, advocating, promoting, and supporting policies, programs, and activities that will benefit the sector's growth and development. While our offices are based in Ottawa, we work closely with our provincial and territorial counterparts, as Walt just mentioned, including TIAC. Walt and his team keep us abreast of what is happening here so that we can address the full range of issues facing this industry. In a nutshell, TIAC exists to give you a voice at the federal level so you can keep focused on running your business. We are here to fight for you, which is exactly what we've been doing, fighting for your survival through this pandemic. For the past 15 months, we've been elevating the issues impacting our industry and meeting with federal officials, including MPs and senators, to share stories of industry challenges and needs. And we've been pushing for sector-specific support and relief aid. From the very beginning of this pandemic, our message to government has been clear. The tourism industry is a vital economic generator and employer of millions. Canada cannot afford to lose this important industry. Tourism was the first hit, the hardest hit, and will be the last to recover. And this industry needs support now and through to recovery. Our advocacy efforts continue daily, and we were happy to see tourism repeatedly mentioned in the federal budget, which was an acknowledgement of the struggles that you've all faced. It is also a step in the right direction by government in recognizing the value and contribution of the visitor economy and the support required to ensure we can rebuild. But what does this really mean to you and your business? I want to highlight a few important pieces of the recently announced budget. And I also want to mention that there are a number of other measures in the budget that may not be directly tied to tourism, but that impact our sector. Things like affordable housing, broadband infrastructure, immigration policies, and funding for Parks Canada. So the budget includes a $1 billion package for tourism support over the next 3 years. This includes funding through the regional development agencies, in your case, Western Economic Diversification Canada, for festivals and events, and towards a tourism relief fund to support investments by local businesses in adapting to public health measures to help their recovery. And it also includes funding to Destination Canada to ensure Canadian destinations are top of mind for Canadians in the beginning, and to entice the return of the high-value international travelers, ensuring we remain a player on the global level. The Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy and Rent Subsidy programs that Vivek spoke about earlier are very important programs to our sector. The proposed extension to September is a good signal towards business support, but we know the sector will need support past the fall. And while we welcome this extension, we will continue our work to ensure the hardest hit businesses receive continued support at existing levels. Now, as mentioned, there are numerous other items in the budget that impact our sector. However, our main priority is to ensure that you understand when and if these supports become available and how to access them. So we will actively be sending out updates and information to industry as we've done. Watch for our COVID updates every Wednesday. And when we learn more through discussions with government, we'll make sure that we work directly with TIAC to ensure that you have this information as quickly as possible. Now, while we share this information with you, I have a favor to ask from you. It is crucial that we hear from you on issues you are facing, particularly pertaining to federal support programs, so that we can work to address them. When we meet with federal officials, we tell your story of losing staff, losing revenue, and worrying about how you will continue to operate. We highlight what your losses and struggles mean to the community and to the country through economic impact. These are unique needs of the tourism industry. While we monitor program rollout, we will also need to look ahead, and TIAC is committed to championing the recovery of the industry. We know that this will need to become vaccine passports have been in the news a lot lately, and we know that they will become a common part of travel documentation moving forward. Our efforts are to lead the conversation to ensure a national approach. We are advocating for a one Canada system as opposed to differing regional approaches, which would provide confusion to domestic and international travelers. However, we now know not everyone will get vaccinated. That is why it is crucially important that we also plan for testing and processes for those that are traveling without a vaccine. It is our firm belief that travel cannot be limited to only those who have been vaccinated. Testing and contact tracing will have to be a part of the system. We are also looking to lead the way rather, in changing the current narrative on your behalf. We need public confidence. We need the consumer to understand that when restrictions are lifted, your businesses are prepared to offer experiences following all the necessary health and hygiene protocols. We know just how much work and investment you have put into ensuring your businesses are compliant and ready for guests. We need to build the consumer confidence for travel so that it can resume again and you can get back to business. And we know travel will resume, and we are advocating for a plan, calling on government to draw a line in the sand and set a target date to reopen. You can't plan with uncertainty. We know you need time to prepare, to retool, to retrain, and rehire before you can be ready to open. We have been facilitating conversations with the Canadian government, but we have also been participating at the global table through the World Travel and Tourism Council, looking at what other countries have been doing to ensure Canada is part of the seamless traveler experience for people that are moving around the world as we recover from the pandemic. While we address the challenges facing the industry, we are also forging ahead on other efforts, including Tourism Week. That's this week. This national campaign has been led by TIAC since 2003. It's a 7-day event to recognize Canada's visitor economy and the impact that it has on every single community across the country. Today is day 5 of Tourism Week, and as part of this week's initiatives, we've been highlighting the tourism industry here in BC through our communications today. And I want to thank all of you who have been involved as we call on Canadians to take the 2021 Tourism Pledge. That is, when restrictions are lifted, to travel in Canada first. Now, before I close, I would personally like to thank our members for supporting our advocacy efforts and encourage all of you to get engaged and support the organizations at the local, provincial, and national levels who are working on your behalf. Thank you once again for joining our town hall today. I look forward to your questions in a little while. And now I'll turn it back to you, Walt.
Thanks very much, Beth. And speaking of questions, I remind you as participants viewing the presentations today to please send your questions to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So in addition to having worked with Beth over a number of years, I've had the pleasure of working with Marsha Walden also over a number of years, and she did a terrific job in our province as the president and CEO of Destination BC, and I know she's going to do a terrific job and already has in a very difficult time as the president and CEO of Destination Canada. So Marsha, over to you.
Thanks so very much, Walt. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Very nice to be invited to join you today as part of this town hall, and it's really great to be speaking to our partners in British Columbia. I just had a peek at the participant list, and I can see some familiar names there. People all the way from Golden to Bowen Island, and a former DBC colleague or two as well. So thank you all for joining this conversation. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je vais donner cette présentation en anglais, mais nous avons fourni le document en français aux gens intéressés. I'm joining you this afternoon from Vancouver, the traditional home of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And for those of you who may not know Destination Canada very well, we are a federal crown corporation, and it's our mandate to sustain a vibrant and profitable Canadian tourism industry, which I can tell you has been a great challenge in this past year, as you all well know. We help to do this through marketing programs internationally typically, but more recently domestically, through research, through destination development work, and through partnerships right across the world. And we also serve as a key source of advice and intelligence for our federal government regarding our national tourism sector. And this past year, our little team has produced over 150 different research reports to help industry understand what is transpiring in the industry as well as government. And as you might appreciate, much of our industry's strength is really found in the relationships that each of you have with your partners in your community, as well as across the industry. And so it is with us. Destination Canada, TIAC, and TIABC have worked together for many years now to bolster our industry's prospects in a highly competitive global sector. But before moving on and talking a bit about where we've come from and where we're going, I just want to spend a moment to acknowledge how terribly difficult this past year has been for tourism and hospitality operators. And among all the slides that I show, this slide I think says it all. And even for those of you left standing, we know that recovery will be a long and challenging path for many of you. And we're here to support you as best we can on that journey. Today, I'll be touching on our work in 3 phases, essentially across 3 time horizons. First of all, surviving the pandemic. And we're all, I think, quite grateful to finally see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. But there are restrictions that will continue to face us as we emerge. Reviving market revenue, really the promise of growth and the opportunity for the future is the only real hope of recovery. None of us can continue to exist on relief measures alone. It has to start with revenue growth. And finally, thriving. We have this opportunity coming out of this great pause to increase the vitality of our industry in the long term and ensure that our industry as a whole is delivering net benefits to the communities we operate in and long-term resilience for the businesses that choose tourism as an industry. So let's start with a brief look backward and the initial response that we and our partners across the country made to help industry just survive the initial devastating impacts of the pandemic. Of course, we all knew that travel would restart first at a very hyper local level. And in most places within Canada, we did see that ray of hope in the summer of 2020 that had us restarting on a local level. And so we worked with our provincial and territorial partners to try to create a very agile co-op marketing approach that invested in communities to help them attract locals and regional travelers to their tourism businesses. And now with BC's new restart plan, I think once again we'll see the same pattern of evolution, moving from intra-provincial to inter-provincial restrictions being lifted, and hopefully not too distant future, the international restrictions as well. We also invested in more than $18 million in other initiatives and partnerships to try to bring together some of the significant players, many of whom have huge reach across consumer marketplaces, and to extend the buying power of the partners that we have in Canada, many of whom had their resources significantly constrained over the course of the early days of the pandemic. And I think it goes without saying that we have to acknowledge that the speed and scale of government response at every level, though not perfect so far, is the kind of response that has never before been seen in times of peace. And so, just looking at the federal government programs alone, in the past year, we've seen over $15 billion put into programs that were supportive to tourism in some way. And so a heroic response with some continued efforts required, as you just heard. Now, looking ahead, we're certainly seeing some very strong signals of future demand that are all pointing in a positive direction, I would say. Our research is showing that consumer sentiment related to travel it really correlates very much so with real-time conditions and what health authorities are saying. And we Canadians tend to be very obedient and listen, thankfully, to our political leaders and health authorities. And so how we feel about travel is very correlated to what restrictions are in place. So with the current very rapid rollout of the vaccine, we're starting to see a lot of good upward trends in consumer sentiment related to travel. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, our latest research shows that people in Alberta and Quebec, and to a somewhat lesser extent Ontario, are the ones that feel most safe in considering travel in their near future, and also most welcoming of visitors coming into their communities. People's feelings in other parts of Canada, including BC, are a little more conservative, though stable. And we hope that with this most recent announcement from Dr. Henry, we'll quickly see some upticks here in British Columbia as well on consumer sentiments related to travel. The good news overall, though, is that 80% of Canadians say they plan to travel when restrictions are lifted. So that's good news for all of us. But we do need to be mindful and perhaps a little cautious about what that could mean, because Canada typically has a huge travel deficit. And so what that means is that Canadians typically spend almost double on outbound travel compared to what foreign travelers spend inbound coming into Canada. So to fuel recovery over these next few months in the summer, it's really important to have Canadians keep their holiday dollars in Canada, even if the border opens, to help speed up our sector's recovery. And in fact, if 2/3 of what Canadians typically spend on their travel budgets is spent in Canada this year, we can speed recovery by a year and gain 150,000 jobs back in the short term. So we can't have Canadians sitting on their wallets until international borders open up. We need them to spend in Canada now, and you're hearing strong messaging on that front from all of the industry associations like TIAC, TIAC, and ourselves, encouraging Canadians to do so. So a key part of our plan to revive revenue is this sort of very high-level multi-phased approach that tries to align our messaging to stay in step with what is evolving health restrictions and conditions right across the country, which has generally been quite asymmetrical over the last year. No two provinces or territories have really been in the same place at the same time. And we're now in this sort of influence and inspire phase, which has really been about trying to help Canadians understand the importance of Canada's tourism industry so that they feel ready to welcome visitors back and want to support our industry in their conversations with our political leaders. And you may have recently seen our new industry anthem video that was really trying to showcase the importance of the people in your community that are working in tourism and what that means to your quality of life as a Canadian. Our early work has also been intended to inspire confidence. So showcasing many of the health protocols that you've put in place, and now inspiring people to invite their friends and relatives and colleagues in some cases to come visit them now that restrictions are being lifted over the next few months in many places. As you know, as we now see most parts of Canada emerging into a new stage of the restart, the marketing that you see from us domestically will begin to be a lot more aggressive in terms of our calls to action, encouraging Canadians to get on with booking their travel. And of course, we know that many have already done so in anticipation of restrictions being lifted. So as Beth said, there are some things that you can do, and here are some things that you can do, I think, to help in the cause of stimulating demand. First of all of us have to be sure that we're making the new health protocols that you have in place in your operation very visible. Make sure that consumers and staff feel a very high level of confidence and safety in the operation in your operation. And secondly, and very importantly, when those first travelers start to show up on your doorstep, try to help amplify their peer-to-peer social sharing so that those early travelers can start to create that tsunami of demand of others that will follow if they're given a sense of confidence about what they see happening out there in travel. So here are just a few examples of some of the work that we've done that's specific to BC. And you'll see on the upper left side of this screen, you may recognize Amber Champion, who is an ocean kayaking and sup guide, and also owner of Blue Dog Kayaking on Vancouver Island. And she told our team just how the pandemic has very much forced her to slow down, helped her to revive her passion for introducing people to ocean paddling. And she very much has a passion for her community, noting that traveling across Vancouver Island in the past little while was really like for her experiencing completely different countries all in one short span of time, with every area offering incredibly dramatic new scenery. So I'm sure that many of you on this call are familiar with that feeling of awe and can't wait to start encouraging Canadians who are living elsewhere to come and visit British Columbia and experience that sense of awe too. And hopefully they can all start doing that as of July 1st. So not surprisingly, we're also trying to remain very active in our key international markets too. We currently do believe that the US will be our first international market to return, particularly the drive market, which will be, I think, our strongest out of the gate opportunity. And we are seeing travel confidence really surging like crazy in the US, with currently 77% of people saying they are ready to travel now. And many are doing so there already, as you well know. And despite what many of you may have seen on the news or elsewhere, there's actually a low rate of vaccine hesitancy among higher educated groups in the US. In fact, it's only 8% among that audience. And higher educated groups tend to correlate with higher income and propensity for international travel, and therefore is strongly aligned with our target audience. So some of the facts that you see with up to 40% vaccine hesitancy may not necessarily be the case for those who wish to travel internationally. We've continued to work very closely with our in-market teams globally to ensure that Canada stays top of mind during this pause. And now that we can see that light at the end of the tunnel, we are really ramping up our efforts, and we'll be investing significantly more in our international markets in 2021 and 22 than we ever have, I think, in our history, given our recent injection of funding from the federal government. And one example of that work is, for instance, with our partner Virtuoso, who publishes Boundless magazine, and these issues were entirely focused on travel ideas in Canada. So wrapping up almost here, as we look farther down the road, we have to ask ourselves, what is it really going to take for the visitor economy across Canada to truly thrive in the future? And we believe that that will begin with a new North Star, one that orients us more towards really why our corporation exists in the first place. And that is to, aspire to have our tourism industry really enhance the quality of life of Canadians and enrich the lives of visitors. And together with all of you, we help elevate Canada's competitiveness as a tourism destination by enabling Canadian culture to thrive and place-based regenerative economies to emerge. So to come on that journey with us, let's stay connected. You can see some of the ways to do that on the screen here now. Je vous encourage à rester connecté avec nous sur nos canaux de communication. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And now I'll hand it back to Walt for some of the fun stuff with Q&A with everybody.
Thanks very much, Marcia. Thank you very much, Marcia. As mentioned at the start of the session, the town hall was developed for you to be able to ask questions directly to our industry leaders on issues that affect your business and, of course, the tourism industry at large. So some of you submitted questions in advance, which I have in front of me, but please, using the Q&A function, if you can continue to submit questions to our panelists. We've got about 15 minutes or so. So the first one I'll throw to Beth, because as both part of your presentation and Vivek's, we know one of the government programs that is extremely important to all of industry is the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And there have been some recommendations now to extend that program. In our case, we've recommended that it go right into the middle of next year, and I'm sure you're doing the same. But any progress on that file? What are you hearing from government on both CEWS and also the rent subsidy?
So thank you, Walt, for that question. And I will say that it's a little frustrating right now. We are not hearing a whole lot of positive response to our requests. There certainly is a huge acknowledgement by the Government of Canada, about the struggle facing the tourism industry. But the way I've put it to them, and I was in front of the Standing Committee on Finance last week, you can't keep the border closed and not support the businesses. So if you're going to keep the borders closed, you got to extend the grant. And if you're going to open the borders, then you need to, but not allow everybody to return to work at the same time. You need to continue to extend the grant in some form. So we are having those conversations on an ongoing basis. The good news is that people are still listening and are still open and receptive to the conversation that we're having with them. And so we will continue to have those conversations and to continue to make the case for extending those programs.
Thanks, Beth. I'm going to throw this one to both Marcia and Beth. I'm hearing a lot, even today, rumblings about the US border being open to Canadians as soon as June 22nd. And I've made a lot of inquiries to people that I know to try to see if there's any truth to that. And I think one of the politicians was on CBC this morning and kind of danced around it. But what are you recommending to government? What's been the advice thus far? I know Destination Canada has had a very good engagement process with government and has advised on border mobility, as has TIAC. So what are you hearing? What are the rumblings to the best of your knowledge in Ottawa? And when can industry anticipate some kind of news out of Ottawa relative to borders reopening? So Marcia, I'll start with you.
Geez, thanks there, Walt. Well, a couple of comments. First of all, we have not heard, I have not personally heard anything from government on June 22nd. I'm not sure if the rumor mill has been manufactured as a result of the most recent border closure being extended to June 21st. So everybody leapt to the conclusion that maybe it was going to open the day after. As we well know, that 1 month extension is now in its 15th or 16th month, I think, of extension. So I suspect that's part of the rumor mill. I think the best and clearest indication that we are seeing comes from the milestones that we're seeing from our health authorities. So in the same way that the provincial health authorities have outlined key metrics for what changes can come when we reach certain milestones of let's say vaccination rates or hospitalization rates. I think Dr. Tam gave the nation some pretty good yardsticks to look at about 2 weeks ago now. First of all, saying that very little would change in terms of mobility until 75% had received the first dose and 20% had received a second dose, and that it was unlikely we would be discussing international border openings prior to 75% of Canadians having a second dose. So Destination Canada is not the authority on this. We are simply a Crown corporation trying to model what we hear from other parts of government. So the modeling that our research team has done based on current vaccination supply rates and uptake rates and all of that is that we should be in a position where we have 75% of Canadians vaccinated sometime in early September, which would mean, a couple of weeks after that, that we might finally see a border reopening. So our best guess is we're still looking at early fall.
Okay, thanks, Marcia. Beth?
So I think that what you're hearing from today is there was a news article that came out from where was it? It was from Point
Roberts,
Washington. And talking about a highly placed source on the U.S. side, and confirmed by somebody at CBSA on the Canadian side, and so there's an awful lot of rumor, but we have not been able to confirm that at all. And so as it stands right now, we have been encouraging government to name a date. I have shared the modeling that Destination Canada has with government, but we've also talked to them point blank about, pick a date. Like, what if it is July 1st? What if it is, earlier than that? But we don't have any source of confirmation on anything at this point.
So it extended further beyond the little rag that Point Roberts publishes, and I shouldn't call it that, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For all of 50 people that live there regularly. But it was a well-placed lawyer in the US that I think fueled the fire. But nonetheless, we'll try and get to the bottom of it. But Beth, I want to stick with you for this question because I think it requires some clarification. When you talked about travel passports and TIAC's position, and correct me, I may have misunderstood this, but are you suggesting that TIAC would support still people coming from other countries, even if they didn't or weren't vaccinated, but could potentially have access to rapid testing, or there's a contact tracing regime in place? Or would you support internationals needing vaccine passports, but not necessarily Canadians to travel within Canada? If you can provide some clarity on that, please.
So the position that we have put to government, and I'm happy to share it with you, Walt, first, so that you can share it with your members, has been one that proof of vaccination should not be required within Canada. Full stop. Once our borders are open, proof of vaccination should allow international travelers to enter Canada and not have to undertake a quarantine period. So what we've suggested is that, and the other important part of that is that we know not everyone is going to be vaccinated. And so we can't limit travel to only those who've been vaccinated. And so there has to be a process in place to manage folks who still need and want to travel, but for whatever their reason, they haven't been vaccinated. So if that's a PCR test 72 hours before departure, a rapid test on arrival, what we are trying to get to, though, is the elimination of the quarantine period. Let's use the testing processes, let's use the contact tracing processes in place so that people can start to travel again without the added burden of a quarantine, both from a time perspective, but also from an expense perspective.
Okay, thanks, Beth. Vivek, a question from you or for you. Can you please clarify the appeal for support of ITAC? Why not push for further support of Indigenous Tourism BC instead?
The reason we mentioned ITAC was because, as we know, there was in the recent federal budget, there was a reduction in their funding. So we've put a letter up to make sure that they have the appropriate level of funding available. ITBC remains a big partner for us, and we are huge supporters and advocates for what ITBC does. And we will continue to support them as and when needed. But ITAC, because of the recent developments, we felt it was necessary that as an advocacy organization, we step up and support them through this period of need.
Okay, thanks, Vivek. Question for you, Marcia. Around the world, there are different situations in different countries. Any thoughts on what markets will be ready to come to Canada in 2022? And this is on the heels of RBC and some of the engagement of obviously all the tourism partners across the country with clients. Any thoughts on 2022?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we did just wrap up RBC Plus, a virtual trade show last week, and I have to say the participation was on the same level as we would normally have for an in-destination show. Incredibly good feedback from our buyers around the world, and they're super bullish on Canada. So the early good start that we had in our management of the pandemic, I would say that is generally holding court. Or holding firm around the country, around the world, sorry. We were a little bit worried that our standing with consumers in other countries would start to slip a bit as we lagged behind on vaccine rollout. But we are now #2 in the world in terms of the pace of rollout, and still in the top 10, of course, amongst those most vaccinated. So specific to Nancy's question, we are anticipating a staggered sort of reintroduction of international markets. Still anticipate the US will be first. Eurozone will be after that, likely leading by, with the UK and Germany in our view first. We're thinking that even though the APAC countries are doing well with vaccine containment, they're a little more insular in allowing toing and froing from their borders. So Australia, for instance, which has almost none, if any, COVID cases, is still planning on closing its borders for, I think, the better half of 2022. So their reintroduction to travel will be very delayed. So I would say short term in 2022, it's the US and our typically strong markets out of Europe, followed by APAC, likely Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and maybe last China, even though they have a good handle on the pandemic.
So Marcia, I'm going to stick with you for a moment because it relates to marketing. Should BC operators ramp up their marketing for summer, and clearly that would be directed at British Columbians and or Canadians? Should we wait for next steps, or can we start now? Now, I'm not sure you can answer the latter part of that question, but nonetheless, what would you recommend to people that are anxious to get marketing?
Well, I would say that you can now see the milestones that are ahead, and all indications are that if we continue on this pace in British Columbia, certainly, and as I'm a resident here, I'm a little more attuned to the specifics of our living situation here. Yes, if you've got an opportunity with the British Columbia market, personally, I'd say get on with it. Just make sure that you have liberal cancellation policies so that your customers never feel put out.
Thank you, Beth. This one's for you. What more can we do to push all levels of government to provide additional assistance? This is in the form of liquidity.
So we, I think that we've been working very closely together, and we need to continue to do this. It never ever hurts for you as a constituent to reach out to your local elected officials, whether they're provincial or federal. Because when they get around the caucus table and they've got fresh information in mind about how the pandemic is hitting you and their constituents, the people who voted them in, that's incredibly helpful. We have been, I will tell you, we've been trying to encourage, we've been asking government to, when rolling out the tourism relief fund that was announced in the budget, the $500 million, to roll it out as grant money, because we're very, very aware of the debt load that small and medium-sized businesses businesses of all kinds have undertaken in the last 15 months. And we just don't want to see them burdened with even more debt. So we still don't have the particulars on that program, but that continues to go forward. But like I say, if you're looking to kind of, you know, add your voice to ours, reach out and talk to your local MP or your local MLA and let them know how they can help you from their position.
Vivek, do you have anything to add there from a BC perspective with our local government?
No, I mean, you know, the needs of the industry have really not stopped because of these announcements. And you know, as an advocacy organization, we will continue to advocate for support because, as I've said many times, we will get to the other side. Our job is to ensure that there is an industry left behind when the timing is right. And that's what, you know, TIAC and Beth and Marsha and everybody else has been doing. And we are a resilient industry. You know, hope is eternal, and we will get there.
So we are just after 2 o'clock. I know we started a couple of minutes late, in 3 o'clock for some parts of our province, but I know we started a couple of minutes late. So I want to wrap up. The questions that we didn't get to, we will certainly try to answer those offline and send those answers back to the folks that asked. But I want to go around the room really quickly with final comments from, let's start with Beth, then Marsha, and then Vivek as we wrap up.
So first of all, I want to let everyone know that we really do understand, you know, the heartache and the pain that you've been going through these last 15 months and the challenges and the frustration, and we're here for you. And so please do not ever feel like you are on your own on this. At the very least, we are a phone call away. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. But I really also want to end on a positive note. I really do think that the light at the end of the tunnel is starting to grow brighter, and that and I know that our industry is resilient. I know we're creative, and I know that we are going to pull through this. You know, not only are Canadians itching to travel, but we know, just, you know, based on what happened at Rendezvous last week, we know that people are itching to travel to Canada again. So try and stay positive. The light's getting brighter at the end of the tunnel, and you know, I can't wait to come out and see you all in person.
Thanks, Beth. Marsha?
Well, I'll leave you with these few words. First of all, get vaccinated. Secondly, I would say, you know, we know friends and family are going to have the most compelling reasons to travel first. So use those opportunities to share what you see with people traveling, and encourage all Canadians, therefore, to have confidence in travel again. And all the best to you this summer. I hope it's a much better one than we saw last year.
Thank you, Marsha. Vivek?
So, you know, I'll speak with the hat of the chair of TIAC first, and I want to thank our membership for, you know, the support and faith they have put in TIAC. And like Beth said, you know, we feel the pain, and I'm also an operator myself, so I understand everything that every business operator is going through, because I'm going through that same thing over here. We may not have the solution to every problem, but I feel very privileged to be in Canada and in British Columbia at this time. If there was any other place, you know, if there was one place on this planet I would have wanted to be, it's our country. And I'm very grateful for everything that, you know, people have done to help us get so far. And we've come so far, we will get to the other side. I have complete faith and confidence in that. So stay well, stay safe. And like Marsha said, let's keep getting jabbed, you know, encourage people to get their shots.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Once again, thank you, merci to the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, Destination Canada, for partnering with TIAC and for being with us today on this informative webinar. Thank you to Beth, to Marsha, and to Vivek, and to all of our participants for tuning in, and hopefully you learned something. But please, as Vivek just alluded to, reach out to any of us at any time if you have any questions or comments. Stay safe. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, Will. Bye-bye.
You.